Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The president held his first news conference in over a year this afternoon. He took questions for an hour and 21 minutes and 44 seconds, because we were counting. It was mostly about Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination. In case you missed it, here's part of what he said.
They've destroyed a man's reputation, and they want to destroy it even more. And I think people are going to see that in the midterms, what they've done to this family, what they've done to these children, these beautiful children of his, and what they've done to his wife. And they know it's a big, fat con job. And they go into a room, and I guarantee you, they laugh like hell. 36 years, there's no charge. All of a sudden, the hearings are over, and the rumors start coming out. And then you have this other con artist, Avenatti, come out with another beauty today. Look, these are very dishonest people. These are con artists. And the press knows it, but the press doesn't write it. I could pick another Supreme Court justice. I could pick another one, another one, another one. This could go on forever. Somebody could come and say 30 years ago, 25 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, he did a horrible thing to me. This is just a game that they're playing. It's a con game. It's at the highest level. We're talking about the United States Supreme Court.
We're going to continue to cover this story all night tonight and obviously throughout the weekend into next. There are many strains of it now. One thing we learned today for certain, though, Democrats badly want control of the Supreme Court. It's all that matters to them at the moment, and they will do whatever it takes, and they are. The latest exhibit comes from the lawyer for pornographic actress Stormy Daniels, whom, as you have heard by now, has a new client tonight. Her name is Julie Swetnick, and she alleges that about 35 years ago, Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh was part of a group of teenage boys in the Washington, D.C. area who committed a series of gang rapes. Kavanaugh himself seemed bewildered today when he was asked about this claim. He described it as like being part of an episode of The Twilight Zone. Many observers felt the same way about it. In the coming days, we'll have time to carefully assess all of these claims and the many counterclaims in the story, and of course we'll bring all of that to you. But tonight we're going to start with some questions, and several come to mind. Here's the most obvious one. What exactly is the allegation here in this new claim? Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut did not hesitate to give his assessment of what it is. Watch.
What we have now for the first time is a sworn affidavit that specifically identifies Brett Kavanaugh as seemingly raping a woman who has been drugged.
Seemingly raped, says Senator Blumenthal. What does that mean? It's important to ask because everything turns on that question. Is Swetnick claiming that Brett Kavanaugh raped her? Is she saying someone else raped her? If so, who exactly is this person, and where is this person today? Did Brett Kavanaugh commit rape? None of that is clear from Swetnick's account, which is far more suggesting than it does stating. Read it yourself and see. Now, Swetnick does claim that she herself was raped by a number of boys. Was Brett Kavanaugh among them? We don't know. Which itself raises a more basic question. Why doesn't Swetnick's sworn and written statements spell out clearly what she claims Brett Kavanaugh did? What is clear is that, according to Julie Swetnick, horrible things happened at a series of parties in suburban Maryland in the 1980s. We're not talking drunken high school naughtiness. These are war crimes level atrocities, the kinds of crimes the UN investigates in third world countries. Groups of young women drugged and gang raped. It's horrifying. So why hasn't anyone taken all of this to law enforcement? Swetnick's lawyer sent her claims to the media, as he always does. Did he contact Maryland police first? They're the ones with jurisdiction here. Are they investigating this? Is this the first time they have seen these allegations? And if it is the first time, how can that be? Swetnick describes attending at least 10 parties at which public drugging and raping took place. Boys were lined up in a queue to commit rape, she claims, in full view of everyone. Did any of the many people at these rape scenes mention these crimes to anyone, to police, to their parents, to their friends, then or in the years since? Washington is a very small place. You may have noticed that if you've been following the coverage of the Kavanaugh story. Among the permanent population here, everyone knows everyone or knows someone who does. So where are all the witnesses to this? Where are the people who would have spoken to witnesses about it over the past 35 years? Did Swetnick herself tell anyone over that time? Kavanaugh's attorney Beth Wilkinson raised these questions today.
I've had people call me and email me saying they know him, they were at the parties, they've never met her, they've never seen her, and they've never heard of any of these allegations. I've got to believe that if this was happening over 2 years, with all these women and all these men, someone else would have heard about it and would have reported it by now.
Fair questions. What's the answer? And by the way, what was Julie Swetnick doing at these parties? Swetnick apparently graduated from high school in 1980. That means she would have been in college at the time they took place, and yet she went to parties with high school kids. At these parties, she saw horrific gang rapes, but she kept attending the parties, many of them, until she herself was gang raped, and yet she never reported any of that to police. It would be interesting to know why. Maybe the most baffling of all, though, how did the FBI miss the fact that Brett Kavanaugh was part of a prolific teenage rape ring? Kavanaugh has been personally investigated by the FBI 6 separate times as part of federal background checks. As staff secretary in the Bush White House, Kavanaugh had the highest possible security clearance, one that allowed him access to this country's nuclear codes. FBI agents would have spoken to a huge variety of people who knew or knew of Kavanaugh during his high school years. And not one of them mentioned he was a serial rapist who committed his rapes in crowded rooms full of classmates. How did that happen? And if it did happen, we know that FBI investigators are criminally incompetent. So incompetent they missed a glaring fact like that. So why would he want them to reinvestigate Brett Kavanaugh a 7th time? Normal people might wonder about all of this, not the media. How dare you ask, they scold. Questions are forbidden here.
When you hear Lindsey Graham, a sitting senator, say things like, I find it curious these charges were never brought forward until 2018, come on.
And it's more than that. He said, I hope people will be highly suspicious of the allegation, because why would she go to 10 parties? Why would any reasonable person, I'm quoting, continue to hang around people like this? If you talk to people in the world of the people that advocate for victims and survivors of sexual violence, sexual assault, they call this victim blaming.
They call this victim blaming. Of course, that depends upon who you think the victim is. Dumb people on television have already made up their minds about that, obviously, and they'd like you to shut up. But there's no reason you should. You're an American citizen. This is your country. It is your Supreme Court. It is your justice system. This process does not belong to cable news anchors or creepy porn lawyers or even to U.S. senators who have decided to give up on due process and instead would like to rule by accusation and screaming. Nope. It belongs to you, too, and you have a right to ask whatever questions you want and to expect adult answers, and you should. Well, tonight breaking as well, the Senate Judiciary Committee has released new transcripts of 2 interviews with Brett Kavanaugh about the allegations against him. Molly Hemingway is a senior editor at The Federalist, and she joins us to discuss all of this. So, Molly, first to the claims brought by Stormy Daniels' lawyer earlier today. How do you assess them? What questions come immediately to mind when you read them, and what effect do you think they will have on this process?
So this woman is alleging that while she was an adult, she attended parties that were hosted by children where other children were raped by the minors in attendance. She asserts by her own claim that she attended 10 of these parties, that she witnessed these gang rapes, and that she continued to go to them, doing nothing while she was an adult and these children were engaged in this behavior. I find it a little difficult to believe that story on its face. As you know, many people in the media are taking it very seriously. They think it's very real that Judge Kavanaugh was the leader of a child gang rape cartel that somehow managed to not be discovered until 4 days before he was about to be confirmed on the Supreme Court. That is something that I think most journalists should be a little more skeptical of. They should have natural skepticism. They rightly pointed out that it was wrong to engage in a conspiracy theory about Pizzagate and child rape then. They condemned people for believing that. And yet here they are, uncritically receiving and promulgating this information that I think most reasonable people would say is a little difficult to buy.
Do you think, since you live in this area, do you think that it is plausible that if you had gang rapes taking place in public in a crowded room, not just 1, but 10 of them, serial gang rapes, that nobody could be located to corroborate that this happened?
If there were 10 gang rape parties where gang rapes occurred, I would imagine there would be many witnesses and much evidence to support this claim. And in fact, it would be shocking that it hadn't come out already. I find it personally shocking that any woman would see a child being gang raped and not do something about that, much less that she would continue to go to parties where this happened. It's a very difficult thing for me to believe, although maybe she has evidence to support this. That those questions
Raising those questions, I will remind you, is victim blaming. So you should be ashamed.
It's worth noting, too, that the first allegation that came out actually seemed like it could at least be a possibility.
Yes.
But each subsequent allegation is getting more and more ridiculous. And that makes it actually seem like the entire thing is part of a sort of coordinated effort rather than a serious problem that serious people should be taking.
Very quickly, and I hate to put you on the spot, do you think that the nomination process will go forward, or will this successfully do what it's intended to do, which is stop it?
Totally apart from the politics of it, it's very important for the country that we not make this the standard by which we allow things to happen. It is very important that people not be able to be bullied out of a nomination by outlandish claims, and that it is just so crucial that we believe that people are innocent until proven guilty. To say that these claims don't come close to meeting the standard of guilt is a huge understatement. And so I think it's actually important for everybody to not let bullies control the process, to understand that people do have a right to have a fair and normal and sane nomination battle, and what we're seeing right now is none of those things.
No, it's not. Molly, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
We're barely half a day from the testimony of Christine Ford before the United States.